You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS Radio WJFK 1580 AM or visiting us at WMCLive.com for this and any of our previous episodes. Look for WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can now stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast worldwide on iTunes. This week we welcome one of the leading feminists in the Philippines whom we snared for a taped interview just before, as it turned out, the mega typhoon hit. We also host the author of a new book on why and how women should run for office, starting with school boards. Last, we're joined for a double-segment conversation with one of only 20 women in the United States Senate, who is an open feminist and the sole Buddhist in Congress. It's quite a conversation. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. Doris Lessing, the British novelist, who won the Nobel Prize at age 88 a few years ago, has just died at age 94. Tributes are pouring in expectably from the literary establishment, of which, by the way, she was very much a part, despite her carefully built reputation as an iconoclastic rebel. She published 50 books, a substantive body of work. Among them, her maybe masterpiece was The Golden Notebook, which was brilliantly structured and was a searing, complex, powerful, nuanced feminist work. Then she stood up from her typewriter and desk and bluntly attacked feminists and the women's movement. And these were not just one or two attacks. This was consistent, starting in the 1970s when she said that the sex wars were hardly important. I mean, there was the Vietnam War to be demonstrated against. Obviously you couldn't do both. But she continued straight on through into the 90s. In 1994, she published an autobiography and talked in it about her having been sexually harassed, and wrote that she got through it perfectly fine, stiff upper lip. Contemporary women, quote, scream or swoon at the sight of a penis they have not been introduced to, feel demeaned by a suggestive remark, and send for a lawyer if a man pays them a compliment. In full disclosure, I must tell you that she also went out of her way to attack me and my work. And this is a long story, too long to go into here. It's all in Saturday's Child, my memoir. But in very short, I wrote a poem that was in my first collection of poetry, Monster, in which I basically accused Ted Hughes of driving Sylvia Plath to suicide. There was huge controversy, censoring of the book by the publishers, enjoining publication in Britain, on and on. Virtually every famous man in the literary establishment, in both England and the U.S., denounced me, though the women were interestingly silent. It might be that they knew, as everybody did, that Hughes was a known womanizer and was more than a bit of a brute, especially to Plath, but in general. Whatever the reason, they didn't join the mob coming to cry and clamor for my extinction, with one notable exception. Doris Lessing took Hughes' side. She attacked the poem in print. She called it emotional, which we all know a poem has no right being, and she attacked its writer as being perhaps unbalanced. And then, oddly, she wrote to me in private, urging me to withdraw the poem from the book so it could be published in Britain because the rest of the book and the rest of the poems were excellent. Oh, you go figure. But the reason she was urging me to withdraw the poem actually seemed to me to validate all the more publishing it. She wrote, the literary community should not wash its dirty linen in public, and, quote, a great deal of effort has gone into trying to keep the Hughes scandal out of the limelight, close quote. Well, In her last years, she stopped writing after a series of science fiction novels that were so disastrous critics actually wondered if they were intended as jokes. Doris Lessing is dead at age 94. She leaves us 50 books. That warrants respect. In her own one, perhaps, masterpiece, The Golden Notebooks, her art actually for a moment forced her into a consciousness that she lacked the courage to sustain. For the rest, well, let's leave it at that. Our first guest is Ana Leah Sarabia de Leon. Ana Leah is probably one of the, if not the, best-known feminist leader in the Philippines, and I would wager in all of South Asia. She was an active participant in the drafting and or promotion of the anti-rape law in the Philippines in 97, the Rape Crisis Center law in 98, the solo parent law, the anti-trafficking law in 2003, the anti-violence against women and their children in 2004, the Magna Carta of Women in 2009, and reproductive health in 2012. She comes from a media background as a television producer, and she also was the founder of the Women's Media Circle in Manila. We spoke with her in New York, sharing a mic, so the level is a little uneven, one day before she returned to the Philippines, which itself was one day before the worst typhoon in the country's history hit. It did not hit where she was, fortunately, and I've learned since that she is, of course, involved deeply in the relief effort. Ana Leah, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's so good to have you here, and I've been wanting to do a phone interview for a very long time when you were in Manila, but you're in New York, so I nabbed you.
Okay.
So tell us what's going down with women in the Philippines.
Women in the Philippines for the last 10 to 15 years had been focused on doing a lot of service, of course, filling in the blanks where government services were not available, but also trying very hard to get many laws passed so that we could pressure government or make government feel obliged to serve women. So we had a new rape law. Well, that's not actually new. It was passed in 97 with Senator Leticia Shahani. That was one of the last things that she did. She got the anti-rape law passed, and that rape law actually made rape a crime against persons rather than a crime against chastity.
Oh, yeah, big difference. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. The next one we did was we were able to get an anti-child abuse law passed. And then we got Rape Crisis Center law passed. And then in 2004, we got the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children law passed. It was like, initially it was a anti-violence against women law, but it was difficult to convince the men in the Senate to protect just women. So they had...
No kidding.
So they said, like, we got to have the children in.
Oh, that's when the word is all one word, women and children.
Yeah, women and children. But the women who were lawyers and were lobbying for this very closely with specific senators were able to say, because we have a child abuse law, you can't use the same thing. So they said, okay, it's women and women who are abused and their children. It's not like all children. So it was a very specific definition of who was going to be covered in this law.
I think most people don't realize that because the Philippines has been, what is the phrase, 500 years in the convent and 40 years in Hollywood?
Yeah, sort of like that.
First occupied by the Spanish and then the Americans, but always occupied by the church, at least in Spain. Yeah. So Divorce, as I don't think some people realize, is still illegal.
We're the only country in the world without divorce.
My God. And contraception and abortion.
Well, abortion, that's unfortunately in 1987, our new constitution prohibited any form of abortion.
Yes.
We have the Catholic Church fighting against everything that the women have been pushing for. For instance, with the law on anti-violence against women, or what you just call here like the domestic violence, anti-domestic violence law.
Yeah.
In the Philippines, the Catholic Church in the beginning was against it because they said you cannot give protection to all women who are beaten up because that means you're going to allow women who are not married to men to get the same protection as the women who are married.
Wow, and then the world would end if you allowed that. That would be real bad. Because if they're not married, they have every
they have every right to
torture to death.
Correct.
Oh my God.
That's what
Who
they.
are these people? What planet? Are they from?
Yeah. So it took like 3 to 4 months to talk to them, and I think they kind of like got a bit embarrassed because there was a big case of this woman who was beaten up and tortured by a well-known warlord politician.
Yes, but was she married or not?
She was married. Yeah, she was married, but the husband was being protected by the bishop.
Oh.
Okay, so I think that somewhere along the line, the bishops had to back off. Otherwise, they would be exposed as being protectors of this man. They backed off, and then so the law was passed. And then they said, well, you have to be thankful that the Catholic Church didn't move against it. Because now we have a law that was passed just some months ago, which is the reproductive health law, which actually mandates the government to fund the contraception or the reproductive health of poor women. The Catholic Church was so against it, and when the present President Benigno Aquino endorsed the law, they like really got so angry, and now first they were trying to get him excommunicated.
I see.
And then when people were saying, okay, go ahead and try, it seems like it didn't really create an impact. So now they're working with some, I think they're working with some people who are trying to unseat him. The reproductive health bill, and it was passed, it became law. And then, of course, Catholic organizations went to the Supreme Court, and now it's still on hold because they want to have it declared unconstitutional.
Oh, boy. But talk a little bit about trafficking, and prostitution, which has been a plague of the Philippines. And I know the women's movement has fought long and hard about that issue, and also the sort of the state of the women's movement, because when I was there, although that was quite a while ago, there was a thriving, diverse, many grouped women's movement working on every imaginable feminist issue.
Well, since how shall I say, I don't know which economic problem. There was like a bubble that was burst, that the economic bubble that was burst first in America, and then it spread throughout the world. Yeah. That was the beginning of the end for a lot of women's groups, because big funding agencies started pulling out. Organizations started first collapsing certain programs until early this year. Many organizations actually collapsed. What happened was when the Magna Carta of Women, that law that we all fought for
that was fabulous.
Yeah, but it was passed in 2009, and it mandated government to support gender issues, women's programs, etc. Many local officials started organizing their own nonprofit organizations.
And skimming.
And then giving, instead of giving the money or the partnership funds to existing women's groups, they
created.
So you.
Oh wow.
So we're at that stage, and we're trying to find a way to revive the women's movement. In the news yesterday, everyone was saying, well, Philippines is number 5 least most gender equal country in the world. I said, my God, how can they, with all the NGOs and the women's groups closing, how can they say that we're number 5 most gender equal? But I don't know what indicators are being used, but you see, that's kind of dangerous when surveys like that say the Philippines is not anymore as bad as it used to be, and it's number 5 next to all these Scandinavian countries. They're really gonna pull out all the funding. I mean, what is this? Well, it's really scary.
What the study meant simply was that if they looked only at economics, they probably found, the gender gap is narrowing because men are now becoming as poor as women.
Oh my God!
And so therefore, it's gender equity. I don't know. Anyway, you have to come back, or if you're not back in person, then we'll do another phoner. So you'll keep us abreast of.
And I think that by the next interview, we should have improved somehow.
Yes, snap to Philippines. Please, we're looking toward you.
Okay.
So salamat.
Salamat. Mabuhay. Okay.
Thank you.
It's time for a brief pause here on Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Whether you want to run for office or just run your own life better, there's a new book out that tells you how to do it. And we'll be right back in just a minute with the author.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back. Our next guest, Rebecca Sive, is a public affairs consultant with an obsession on advancing women in the public space. She's been a public official, a board member, an officer of many public interest organizations, an advisor to other women leaders and to those seeking and holding public office, and an organizer of national women's issues agendas for Presidents Carter, Clinton, and Obama. Welcome, Rebecca, to Women's Media Center Live. Good to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Robin.
Well, you've written a very interesting book. Every day is Election Day. A Woman's Guide to Winning Any Office from the PTA to the White House. And it has a foreword by Anna Eleanor Roosevelt, which is not chopped liver. And what I really like especially about this book is the PTA part. Not the PTA itself necessarily, but not every woman is going to run for the White House or need to or should, but she needs to win. This is a book about power. And whether you're running at all for, let's say, the city council or the school board, that's true, the right wing is running for the school board all the time. Why aren't we? Or whether it's at your job or wherever, it's a very practical guide. And I thank you for it. And it spans all the way from the grassroots to, advice from U.S. senators like Debbie Stabenow and Mary Landrieu. How did you come to write this?
Well, I came to write the book because I've been a women's activist for many years, focusing on public policy and political advocacy, and I thought the time had come to share the generations of experience and true-to-life stories, really, of women from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of positions. To your point, it's really important for women to have this kind of guidance for how they too can be leaders wherever they find themselves and wherever they want to go. So this sort of hands-on, our time is now, we broke a glass ceiling.
You offer us real grounded, sometimes very funny tips on getting power, on how to finance efforts, which is always a problem for women, on how to brand your politics yourself. Share a few of those tips with our listeners.
Well, what I wanted to do was to really share the sort of basic rules of thumb that any woman would have to consider, and then a series of lessons, there are about 30 in the book, of what to do and how to do, interwoven with the stories of women who've actually done this work, so that it's not speculative or far-reaching in the sense of, well, I wish I could do X, but here's how to do X. And so the kinds of things I address are this sort of difficult but important challenges for women to get past, as you pointed out, like branding yourself so that you have an effective presence and message as you venture forth, how to raise money, how to recover from failure, how to build alliances among very diverse sets of people, how to look at where the opportunities lie and assess whether you're going to run or seek to be appointed or run a large advocacy organization. The book is really, as you pointed out, about leadership in all of these public contexts in which women's voices are important and, so to speak, women's issues are vital. So it's just that hands-on, take a look, here's how, big resources section, and, real, honest, true-to-life stories from a range of people.
Yeah, those voices are dynamite. And I also really appreciate the fact that you make a point of saying failure is inevitable. And here's how. So
Right.
Don't keep trying to be Miss Perfect, which is the way we've all been raised, one way or another. And don't fear, oh my God, I shouldn't even try because what if I
Right.
fail? Of course you'll fail.
Right.
Failure is part of the process. Here's how to pick yourself up. That is just invaluable advice, and more important almost, I think, than anything else in the book. But the you can never care too much section, I have these wonderful four main stages, listeners. Every day is election day. Take on the big boys. You can never care too much, and confront, co-opt, and control.
Right.
But the you can never care too much section really spoke to me, because if you have a passionate intensity about these politics, somebody is always telling you, listen, you're caring too much, or you're going too far. I titled one book, Going Too Far.
Right. Well, there's a combination, and the four sections of the book kind of get at this. There's a combination of you want to be a public leader because there are ways in which you want to improve the world that are tremendously important and legitimate, and at the same time you can't do that without asserting your right to power and influence. So this is a sort of companion approach of saying, yes, seek power to further the public good, and if you fail along the way, so what? To use a sports metaphor, it's a 9-inning game, and sometimes it goes into overtime.
Yeah.
And I just think too frequently women sort of say, well, I tried it, it didn't work, let me go back to this. And so that's exactly why I say no. It's about a continuous approach to leveraging your power and influence in whatever context you can to help other women.
But this is a women's approach. Too often, I think, when women think of gaining power, often we flee from power because we think of it as being used the way the guys have used it, and we have a visceral reaction against that. So I often refer to the fact that we're redefining power, power to, not power over. But you spend a lot of time talking about sisterhood. I mean,
Yes.
About the need for women friends and colleagues and to mentor, to be mentored, to help, or else you go stark raving bananas.
Right, and I think that the important point there is, in several respects, that sisterhood is so powerful. One is that it is women who are your natural allies in your search for public leadership that advances women. Secondly, it is when you gather women around the table, the more the better, that a really diverse set of voices is heard and listened to. It's hard when there's only one. And I think the third thing is that as women voters and male voters too, or decision makers who are appointing people, look at the people who are asking to be in the seat. They're saying, is this woman going to be for me, right?
Right.
Is she going to represent the concerns that women have really across the board and regardless of party affiliation in many instances.
That's right, yeah. I mean, all issues are women's issues, but women's take on those issues is very different. We've seen it in the gender gap. We just see it in many areas. So addressing that different response to those issues is, I think, the job.
Right, and it's also true that as you well know, that historically it's been the case, and it remains the case, that it is women who, in these positions of public influence and power, who advocate for and fight for policies that actually benefit women. So,
right.
As a practical matter, absent women in those positions, we don't have, as women, what we need, which is advocates against rape or domestic violence or for women's health, any number of issues. So it's there is a diversity matter of women at the table. There is our perspective on all issues, and then there is this commitment to issues that particularly benefit women and enable them to live secure lives.
Well, you've really done a service, and I recommend this book highly. Again, it's called Every Day is Election Day, A Woman's Guide to Winning Any Office from the PTA to the White House. The author is Rebecca Sive, and thank you for having been with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Well, thank you, Robin, for having me. It's a treat to talk to you.
Now let's practice a little verbal karate. The other day I was thinking about that irritating cliche phrase, the liberal elite. And so I looked it up in the manuscript of Unspinning the Spin by the great word maven Rosalie Maggio, which will be the first Women's Media Center book, and it will be due out in just a few months, so hang in there. But I have the manuscript because Gloria Steinem and I are writing the preface, so I can look it up in advance. And the entry was very interesting. Rosalie quotes Michael Kinsley, who in turn is quoting Newt Gingrich, using the term elite as an all-purpose epithet. Directors of art museums, intellectuals, etc., and time and again the elite media. So the guide recommends avoidance of the use of elite unless quoting someone. But it got me thinking, what if we were to use it, but to use it about conservatives and Republicans? It actually fits much better. They're the rich ones. They're the 1%. They're not the intellectual elite, but they are the moneyed elite, the privileged elite. So let's just start putting that into usage. The conservative elite, the Republican elite, the right-wing elite, the elites, the elites, the elites. It fits. We have to take another short break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still Robin Morgan. When we come back, we will be talking with the woman they call the new rock star of the United States Senate, the Buddhist among cynics and fundamentalists, the remarkable Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat of Hawaii.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back again. I want to thank author Helen Zia and Leah Shigemura, both dear friends, for helping to facilitate this next conversation with the woman they call the new rock star of the United States Senate, the Buddhist amidst fundamentalists, the unabashed feminist, Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat of Hawaii. Welcome, Senator, to Women's Media Center Live. Aloha. It's really an honor to have you with us. I have to say, you are like the ideal fantasy of a senator, as if a group of feminists had got together and gotten tipsy on champagne and said, well, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and then it turns out to be you. You're one of us. You were active against the Vietnam War as a very young woman. You were come out of a social justice context. You were a state legislator. After you went to law school, you became lieutenant governor, and then you ran for Congress and won the seat once held by the great Patsy Mink, who I had the honor of knowing, and who was the first Asian American woman in Congress, and.
Yeah.
And now, look at you now, in the U.S. Senate, the first and only Asian American woman in the Senate, and the first woman senator from Hawaii, and the first Buddhist in the Senate. I mean, there's so many firsts, it takes your breath away, and it all is a long, long way from the little immigrant girl who arrived from Fukushima, Japan, and was not able to speak or read English when she started elementary school. And it all begins with the mother, doesn't it?
Very much so. And my mother had tremendous courage in Japan when she decided literally to escape from a terrible marriage, because my father was an alcoholic and a compulsive gambler and never took care of his family. And my mother decided that she needed to get us all away so that we could have a chance at a better life. Tremendous courage and risk-taking. So she showed me that one person can make a difference. So, my path to the U.S. Senate was a highly unlikely one, but it also points out not only how one person can make a difference, and that was Mom, but what a great country the United States is, and which ultimately led me to give back in a way that I think, I'm very privileged to serve in the United States Senate. But when you mentioned about the first for me, when I was running for the seat, one of the first rallies that I had with supporters, and I said the U.S. Senate could use a lot more diversity, and that I brought quadruple diversity to the U.S. Senate because I am a woman. I would be the first Asian woman ever to be elected to the U.S. Senate. I'm a Buddhist. I'm an immigrant. And someone in my crowd yelled out, yeah, but are you gay? And I said, nobody's perfect. And here we are, Hawaii, having just passed marriage equality, something that I have supported for a long time.
I was going to congratulate you on that. Yes, it is fantastic. Hawaii has been ahead of the country, the rest of the country, on many things, many of which you've been behind as well, as a state legislator as well as a national legislator. It's not only an incredibly beautiful place, but it seems to be quite a progressive place.
Very much so, and you mentioned my friend Patsy Mink, who continues to be an inspiration to me, along with my mother. We were friends because we both were in elected office for many years, and our paths crossed many times. The last time I ever saw Patsy was at a 4th of July parade in 2002, and she invited me to particularly to have lunch with her. I was running for governor at that time, and she said to me, Mazie, you just have to win. You just have to win. And I knew what she was talking about. It is from a woman who had run for governor, for mayor, for president, for Congress, and lost, and she just kept picking herself up. So she was a trailblazer in so many ways, and I know that when I got elected to the United States House of Representatives, my very first vote that I cast as a member of the U.S. House was for the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Oh.
And and most people just would say the name Nancy Pelosi. It was a roll call vote. Can you imagine? 435 people.
Wow.
But when my name was called, I said, in memory of Patsy T. Mink.
Oh, wow.
I vote for Nancy Pelosi. And I remember Nancy turned around and flashed me this huge smile, and there were a lot of people with tears in their eyes because Patsy left us so suddenly that my colleagues in the House never had a chance to say goodbye to her.
I know.
So many people came up to me and told me about how much they loved and respected Patsy. So I was honored to get elected to the seat that Patsy held for so long and so well.
She would also be
hand on her shoulders.
She would be so proud of you that when you did leave that seat, you left it for the U.S. Senate. I mean, she would just be over the moon with that. But she was so funny as well. She had a very wry, understated sense of humor that many people didn't get. And I remember once she was referring to the triumvirate of herself, Bella Abzug, and Shirley Chisholm, who were a formidable trio. And she said, well, we're really the three witches from Macbeth, or so they regard us. But we cook up very good potions,
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, she was remarkable. But you are remarkable. You serve on the Committee on Armed Services, on Judiciary, on Veterans Affairs, and on Environment and Public Works. And one of your recent battles has been for the Military Justice for Sexual Assault Survivors Bill.
Yes.
We've been covering that a lot on this program, and I take it from what I've read that you are a part of the force majeure that also the senator from my state, Kristen Gillibrand, is the bill to take it out of the chain of command.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us how we're faring on that?
Well, for one thing, I consider Kristen my sister in this, and I so much respect her. I talked with her just last night to touch bases on where we are. We're just continuing to push to get the support we need. We're not quite there, but the recognition of sexual assault in the military as really a scourge on the military, and just calling for something more than the smaller steps that we have taken in Congress over the years that have not resolved the problem. So there is a growing group of us, and we continue to garner support, who have said that on sexual assault in the military, we need to take the decision to prosecute out of the chain of command.
Yes, I know.
And I don't think that the world will come to an end if we do that, but I do think that it will result in many more of these crimes being reported, since that is one of the major problems with sexual assault in the military. Yeah. Thousands and thousands of these assaults are occurring, and only a few of them, just a small percentage of them, are ever reported. Why? Because the survivors, to a large extent, believe that nothing will happen.
Well, and nothing does. I mean, the problem with the McCaskill bill, and I certainly respect Senator McCaskill, and I know her concern for women is sincere. But the problem is that when it remains in the chain of command, there have been just horrific cases where even people who have been convicted of sexual assault have been pardoned by the commanders. So the trust is broken, in that approach, and this seems to be the much more sensible approach. Talk a little bit to us about what must be very close to your heart, getting some movement on immigration and on immigrants in this country. I mean, why can we not move Washington off paralysis on this?
Sadly, there are people here who do not think that the kind of comprehensive immigration reform that we need to bring 11 million undocumented people out of the shadows so they can live the kind of lives that will enable them to attain their American dream. There aren't enough people here who believe that, certainly not in the House. But in the Senate, I'm happy to say that as a member of the Judiciary Committee, it was very purposeful work for me to engage on amending that law, and particularly continuing to emphasize how important family unity is as a guiding principle on immigration reform. Because you may know that there's a lot of emphasis on enabling people with science, technology, engineering, and math backgrounds to come to our country. But even those folks need their families.
Yes.
And clearly women were disadvantaged by the new merit system that's in the Senate bill. And so I began to talk with the women in the Senate to have them support what came to be known as the Hirono Women's Amendment that would give women from these countries a much fairer opportunity to immigrate to our country. And ultimately, there were hundreds and hundreds of amendments that were filed for the immigration bill in the Senate, and we were negotiating which amendments would come to the floor for a vote. I ultimately did get Lindsey Graham to support my amendment for women, and it became the number one amendment that the Democrats were negotiating to bring to the floor. And sadly, those negotiations did not bear fruit, but I continue to push for supporting women and families and comprehensive immigration reform.
It boggles the mind, doesn't it, about how so many of the same people who pontificate about family and family values and use that to oppose everything from women's reproductive rights to funding for battered women's shelters. Suddenly, when it comes to this issue and splitting families up, look the other way.
Yes.
It's cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Even when you point it out, it doesn't seem to make much difference, sadly. But, you know, I keep plugging away because you can't be in the system without feeling that you can make a difference and find allies that will, you know, help get us there.
We have to pause here for just a moment on Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but we will be right back with more of the wonderful Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back again, picking right up in our conversation with United States Senator Mazie Hirono. Well, it sometimes seems, I grant that I have a bias in this direction, but it sometimes seems that the only grown-ups left in Washington are women, at least certainly in the Senate, and quite a few in the House. Are the famous Barbara Mikulski monthly dinners among the Senate women still an ongoing tradition?
Yes, and it may not be monthly, but I've gone to, at least 3 or 4, and there have been a couple of times where we've all brought our own dishes, and it's just a wonderful gathering, in a bipartisan way. And, you know, I've gotten close to Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and we have a lot in common. Alaska and Hawaii, the friendship and support continues. And Lisa is a terrific person to work with.
She was the one who was savaged. She was savaged by the Tea Party, right? And she ran despite them, as a Republican and then as an independent. Yeah. What's your advice for us? I think we're up to 20 now, right, in the Senate, and 78 in the House. Yeah, historic. Still not what you'd call parity, and at this rate, no. I think parity is going to take another, 50 years or something like that, which is not making us happy. What do you suggest we need to do more?
We need to support women and minorities to run at the local level. We need to get us into the pipeline, because I don't think that we just come full-blown and say, hey, I think I'll run for the U.S. Senate now, coming from nowhere. That's pretty tough. So I've said we need to find good people to run, particularly at the local level, get us all into the pipeline, and then for women to support qualified women that with money, for example, that's a reality. And of course the grassroots support is important. Emily's List is a huge part of so many of the women's success in coming to the U.S. Senate. And in fact, I formed a Patsy Teaming Political Action Committee in Hawaii to support pro-choice progressive Democratic women running for state seats in Hawaii.
You are so amazingly, refreshingly consistent. I mean, all the way on every issue. The more that I studied your career, the more breath took I became. And it goes down to the tiniest attention to detail. But you just recently, you donated your salary from the government shutdown to Meals on Wheels because you thought it was unfair that you got paid when poorer people didn't and they were suffering. I mean, it really is an extraordinary attention to detail, Senator. And you should know that some of us notice that and are really grateful for it.
I continue to be very privileged to serve here, and programs such as Meals on Wheels and Food Bank are programs that I have supported for a long, long time. What could be more fundamental than providing food to people?
Well, it's true. I have just a couple more questions. One, given the war on women and women's reproductive rights that seems to continue no matter how many times we think we've won it and put it to rest, how is that going at the moment, given the health, the spasms that are afflicting us over the health care crisis?
It is so important that women's choice remains a real choice for every woman, and this is why I have signed on to Richard Blumenthal's bill that would, in effect, prevent states from putting all kinds of barriers to a woman's right to what I consider a fundamental constitutional right to choice. So I know that as a member of the state legislature for many years, the battle was taken to the state legislatures, and hundreds of bills restricting a woman's right to choose were enacted at the state level. And these bills are becoming more and more outrageous.
They are.
Totally outrageous, invasive. And so I told Richard yesterday that, this is a stake in the ground that I'm happy to put in, and I'm going to stand with him as we go forward to garner support for this bill. It's going to be quite a battle because the state legislators are very busy with all of their restrictive bills.
They're chipping away at the base of it. 85% of counties in the entire country now lack an abortion provider. So they've been chipping away at it in every possible way, and this bill would address that if we can get it, passed. So we have to keep an eye out for it and write letters of support.
Very much so, and the issue of abortion was that's the first issue that I wrote a political letter on when I was in college. And I wrote a letter to my members of Congress asking them what their positions were on abortion, because the state of Hawaii was considering decriminalizing abortion, and we became the first state in the country to decriminalize abortion way back when.
Yay, Hawaii.
Yes.
All right. My last question reverts back to the personal. If you could say one thing that was that caused you the greatest pride in your life, what would it be? And what caused you the greatest regret in your life? What would that be?
I think that, the greatest pride is to have a mom who just showed so much courage and showed me the way, because I think that if I grew up in a more typical household, I would not be here. I would not have recognized that there was more to what I wanted to do with my life than as I've said in the past to some groups, than making my little self happy. So my mother is a continuing inspiration, and when I got elected to the U.S. Senate, she and I looked at each other, and I know both of us were thinking way back to when we first left. We disembarked from the President Cleveland, where we came with one suitcase in steerage, and both of us, I know, were thinking those thoughts. And what a long road it has been, and it's not over yet. So as far as regrets, I don't spend a lot of time regretting things that I've done, because I think that for all of us, we all have amazing stories to tell. And all the choices that I've made have led me to this path. And so I just move on. And that's really what my mother did. She just faced challenges.
But she lived to see you in the U.S. Senate.
She had setbacks, of course. Yes. And she's 89 years old, and she lives with us. She takes care of us, and she continues to be an amazing source of strength for me.
Oh, wow. Well, please, she will not know or care from whom, but please give her my my love and my admiration. She's quite a woman herself, and so is her daughter. And
Thank
I'm
you.
so grateful to you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live and for everything you do every day in the U.S. Senate. And we will be watching the rest of your career on to bigger and better things. I would love to see the first woman president happen to also be an Asian American who happens to be a Buddhist. That would be quite a moment.
Although I would have to be born in this country, so I won't be able to run for president. But believe me, I'm happy to support a woman to be our next president.
Well, listen, we used to always fantasize that since Hawaii was the last matrilineal and matriarchal originally before the conquest, that maybe women should take it over again. And
we had a queen.
Yes, you did. But the next best thing is you in the U.S. Senate.
That's very kind of you to say, and thank you so much for having this program and having me on it.
Thank you, and aloha.
Aloha.
And now it's time for Fighting Words. If you happen to be in or near New York City before November 23rd, make it over to the Grolier Club. That's Grolier, at 47 East 60th Street. You can get more information at www.grolierclub.org. They are hosting an exhibit honoring female pioneers in science, and it's one of those exhibits that on the one hand inspires you and makes your heart sing, and on the other hand makes you so angry. It's filled with tantalizing little-known details about the lives of 32 women who made major contributions in physics, chemistry, astronomy, math, computing, and medicine from the 17th through the 20th century. A few are famous, most are not. 9 did win Nobel Prizes. But the stories of the individual women, for example, Hertha Ayrton, Ayrton, born in 1854, British, who became an electrical engineer, but at a meeting of the Royal Society of London in 1902, she was not allowed to present her own work, which was being celebrated, but her paper had to be read to the gathering by a man. The Royal Society also declared her ineligible for membership because they didn't accept women until 1945. She became involved in the suffragist movement. Then there was Sophie Kowalewski, born in Russia in 1850, who became a noted mathematician despite her father, who had a, quote, horror of learned women. She had to study math and physics in secret. She married a man she didn't love to get away from her daddy. The marriage was a disaster, and she made it to Berlin, but couldn't find a university that would let her take a degree. She did manage, finally, to get a degree and become a mathematician. And then there was Mary Corinna Putnam Jacobi, whose father offered to pay her to stay home rather than go to medical school, which wouldn't let her in anyway, so she went to pharmacy school instead. She finally found a medical college in Pennsylvania that would let her in. She didn't find it rigorous enough, so she went to Paris to study, and they wouldn't let her in either. And finally, French medical school would permit her entry, but made her enter the classroom by a separate door and sit alone near the professor. She won a prize from Harvard in 1876 for a paper in which she provided scientific evidence disproving the widely held belief that menstruation impaired women's mental abilities. Harvard was less respectful to other women. For example, Cecilia H. Payne-Gaposchkin is recognized today as a founder of modern astrophysics, but she was not allowed to be a graduate student in 1923. She did, however, make it to becoming a professor in 1956 and became the head of the astronomy department, the first chairwoman of any department at Harvard. It makes you crazy, it makes you cry, it makes you angry, it makes you proud. And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS Radio WJFK 1580 AM. or you've been visiting us at WMClive.com for this or any of our previous episodes. And be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook, Twitter, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program, Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams-Chancellor, and our founding sponsor, Regina Kulik-Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us. Next week we'll be on hiatus, but you can catch a rerun of our blockbuster season premiere last September with Dee Dee Myers, Sheryl Sandberg, and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Then when we return on December 7th, Gloria will tell, Steinem that is, all the details on what it was like to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And I'll fill in the corners because I'll have been there at the White House to support her. Meanwhile, look for us on Facebook and Twitter for news of exclusive breaking news segments, surprise upcoming guests, and future shows, only here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.